My name is David Peel. I first went to Meadowell in 1979 as assistant curate at St John's, Percy Lane, then worked later on at Cedarwood from 84 to 88, left to do another job, came back in 1991 and stayed there till I retired. The idea of Cedarwood was simply to be around and to be a presence on the estate, which people would have access to and use the staff. And so that's how it developed.
Sense of community is still a huge thing for the Cedarwood Trust. That it is very much a place of community where community happens, and yet there has been huge changes within community life actually on the Meadowell estate itself.
Oh, yes, that's right. When I first arrived, the estate was going through one of its several refurbishments. There was a lot of demolition going on, particularly on the South Meadowell. The North Meadowell had been done by then, except for Barmouth Way. The South Meadowell was, the houses had been gutted and remade really.
So is that
Bamboo Way used to be there.
Is that the area where you would go through underneath the tunnel?
You would walk through from near Waterville Road, under the tunnel, and you can still do that. You can still walk through. At one time you could also drive through from down Banbury Way, but that was closed up after the riots in 1991, after the 1991 riots. Similarly, the road down Minton Lane was made pedestrians only. You used to be able to drive through there, but that was made pedestrians only, again, a little while after the riots.
So do you see these all as barricades?
Oh yes, I think that at the same time the Royal Quays development was being planned and put into operation, and I think that the South Meadowell became a sort of cordon sanitaire between the nice Royal Quays and the nasty North Meadowell, as others would see it. And at the same time the North Meadowell, a little later on, was partly rebuilt again with what are called hammer end streets, so you can't drive anywhere through them, and fencing along part of it at any rate. And so people think of it as, or describe it to me as a prison, feeling like a prison. It's a method of containment. I think there are still lonely people around, and poverty is the running sore, and that's getting worse and worse at present. Under the last government, child poverty was gradually being reduced, and it's going up. It's been going up again for the last few years, and there are more and more stories of people having to choose whether to eat or heat. And I know from talking to people who are now at Cedarwood, that there is plenty of use of the food bank. I know that also from talking to the workers at the Phoenix Detached Youth Project, that they have access to food. So poverty is the same running sore, expressed, I suppose, in different ways as the years go by.
One of the things the group's been looking at is the area at the industrial estate up Norham Road, and how that used to be such a rich source of employment for people on the Meadowell estate. Yeah. And they've been and had a look and taken some photographs and things, and
it's empty now.
It's empty, absolutely.
Just a desert.
Yeah, a desert's a good description.
And I think people have become more cynical and more hopeless, in the sense that they're less ready to say, well, something needs to be done, can we do it? People are more resigned to their fate, really. I think one of the fascinating things which happened was that after the riot, a thing called the Meadowell Community Development Trust was set up. And the estate was divided for electoral purposes into 10 or 12 little constituencies, call them that. And elections were held for the representatives to go on the Meadowell Trust, the Community Development Trust. And the turnout for those elections was very, very high, much higher than it had been, I think, for the general election, certainly for the local authority elections. And so people were elected to be on that trust. That was the high point, I think, in that sense. But nothing like that has been possible since. When plans were afoot to modernise the South Meadowell in the late 80s, very early 90s actually, there was a great survey done by the people who were going to do the modernisation, saying, do you want to come back and live in your house? And I think a lot of people said yes, of course. But then, by the time they got around to doing anything about it and the houses had been vacated, a lot of the roofs had been taken off and the copperwork taken out, illicitly of course. And so the council or the builders decided just to pull all the houses down. So they were all pulled down. And effectively a new estate was built. Most of the property on the South Meadowell is new.
You've seen a lot of input from various organisations, from individuals, from people trying to make a difference over the years. You've seen decisions made by local authorities and agencies.
Yes.
And all of that, for better and for worse, leaves seeds and shadows.
Yeah.
So if you could imagine a better future for the Meadowell estate, and we're given the opportunity to create a community development programme now, very briefly, what would that look like? How would it be?
You mean the 1970s revisited and revived, and not revived, but modernised? I think it would be important to find out what people want, for a start. It would also be important not to imply any promises that couldn't be fulfilled. It's no good saying to somebody, do you want a swimming pool? And they all say yes, and then say, well, sorry, there's no money for a swimming pool. It's a stupid way of going about it. But if you can find ways of getting them to put forward realistic possibilities, which might be quite small, but which they can then be helped to work towards, perhaps with professional assistance. A very important person in Meadowell's life was Tony Gibson, who's still alive. He's aged about 97 now. And he came to do some community development work. And it was he who helped in the preparation of a redevelopment plan just before the riots. The council rejected it until the riots happened. Then they came scrabbling for it, wanting it. But he used to talk about experts being on tap, but not on top. And I think that's quite a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And maybe that's a lovely way to sum up. Experts on tap and not on top.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you do need experts, obviously professional things, people like architects, lawyers, all the rest of it, but also community workers who can stand back a bit from the pushings and shovings that are natural in any community, and help to guide people to relate to each other profitably.